For this press briefing. I will try to be brief, but before I go to the program today in the Human Rights Council, I simply wanted to inform you that there was a letter sent to the President of the Human Rights Council, that's Ambassador Federico Villegas, was sent last night to him requesting that the Council convene an urgent debate during the current session to address the situation of human rights of women and girls in Afghanistan. Now, in all likelihood, this urgent debate will take place 1 week from today, the 1st of July. Details are being sorted out for how that meeting will be convened. The letter requesting this meeting was sent to the Council President by the permanent representatives here in Geneva of the European Union and France, and this was again last night after I sent my update. So details on the urgent debate on Afghanistan next week will be shared with you closer to the date and when it, specifically when it will be held. I also just want to recall that prior to this briefing, there was a press briefing with the Special Rapporteur on Climate Change and Human Rights, Ian Fry, who briefed you here. This was, Mr. Fry is the first ever Special Rapporteur on Climate Change and Human Rights, and whose mandate was created by the Human Rights Council in October last year. He presented his first report to the human rights body yesterday, spelling out his vision for this important mandate. And for those of you who might have missed either the presentation yesterday or the press briefing this morning, it is available on UN webcast. Now, turning briefly to today's program, the Council this morning heard from the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Migrants, Felipe González Morales, addressing human rights violations at international borders, trends, prevention, and accountability. That's the title of his report. And this was followed by an interactive discussion, which is currently underway. At roughly noon, the Council will hear from an independent expert on international solidarity. That's Obiora C. Okafor. And his report is addressing international solidarity and extraterritorial application of human rights. This afternoon, the Council will hear from the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Opinion and Expression, Irene Khan. And her report is speaking to the reinforcement of media freedom and safety of journalists in the digital age. The report is available and it will be presented this afternoon. Incidentally, she also has a report being presented on a recent visit she undertook to Hungary. And then late in the day today, finally, the Council will hear from the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty, Olivier de Scutter, whose report this year addresses the non-take-up of rights in the context of social protection. And he also has reports on his visits to Lebanon and Nepal. So that's later in the day. Very briefly, just to give you an overview of Monday's program, the Council will hold a two-part panel discussion on the human rights of women and girls. At 10 a.m., the first panel will address the nexus between climate change and violence against women. And at 4 p.m., the second part of that panel will focus on gender response approach to care. In between these two panel discussions, the Council will continue its interactive discussion with the Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty, as I just mentioned, and then we'll hear a presentation from the Special Rapporteur on the Human Rights of Internally Displaced Persons, whose report addresses the right of IDPs to participate in electoral processes. And lastly, as always, I just simply want to remind you of the various informal consultations taking place in parallel to the main event in room 20 on various draft resolutions which are being negotiated for the eventual consideration by the Council on the last 2 days of the current session. That's 8th and 9th of July. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rolando. Yes, question from Robin, and then we have a question online.
Thank you very much. On the urgent debate, does this mean that it will definitely be going ahead, but at some point? And also, could you just explain a little more about the process of securing an urgent debate, the things that you have to do in order to get an urgent debate? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, Robin. In fact, an urgent debate is more or less a special session within a current regular session. It only requires one of the 47 members of the Council to convene it. In this case, as I mentioned, we have the permanent observer of the European Union and France, a permanent member, rather a member of the Human Rights Council. It's a simple process, obviously, to draw attention to the plight of, in this case, women and girls in Afghanistan. So these states decided it was urgent enough. Now, other states have actually added their voice to that initial request expressing support for this meeting to take place. What we will do is share with you the list of states that have supported this, both members and observers of the council. And as I mentioned, we'll also share with you details on the actual meeting itself. We expect it to be approximately 2 hours a week from today.
Okay, we'll go now to Peter Kenny online.
Thanks. Yeah, Rolando, I know that Sunday is International Day of Torture, and we don't have a special rapporteur on torture at the moment, I don't think. Is there going to be any statement on this? Is there any person who can speak on this? I've been trying for a few days to get somebody to speak to me about this, and it'll be good if there is going to be something on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, indeed, it's a very important issue which the council has been abreast of, and we do have a special rapporteur. There is a pending appointment of a rapporteur at the end of this session on the 9th of July. The president of the council will appoint a successor to Nils Meltzer, who, as you know, stepped down at the end of March this year. I would suggest you contact our colleagues, as I have actually, the treaty body section. There's a committee against torture. There's a subcommittee on the prevention of torture. Experts there might be able to speak to this important subject and, of course, important observance.
John Zaragoza.
Yes, good morning, Rolando. Just a couple of points. Is Mr. De Schutter or Irene Khan planning to give a press conference today or not? And secondly, has Irene Khan put out any statement on the decision in the UK to extradite Julian Assange to the US? Thanks.
Thanks, John. I'll have to defer to colleagues who work closely with these rapporteurs. We have not announced any press conference with either rapporteur on freedom of expression, an opinion, or an expert on extreme poverty, but I'll double check with my colleagues to see if that is possible. If not a press conference, certainly we'll try to arrange, and we could make sure that they're amenable to do some interviews with you. And in terms of any other speaking engagements, thanks.
Good, thank you. I don't see any more questions, Rolando, so all the best for today and next week. Catherine Huisseau from UNCTAD has a couple of brief announcements.
Bonjour à tous. Oui, quelques annonces. I'll switch to English. UNCTAD will participate in the 2022 UN Ocean Conference taking place from 27th June to 1st July. The UNCTAD delegation will be led by UNCTAD SG, Rebecca Greenspan, where she will join UNSG Antonio Guterres in Lisbon. UNCTAD is promoting a Blue Deal for global trade, investment and innovation as a means to create sustainable and resilient ocean economy that benefits all. This will enable the world to sustainably harness the ocean's economic, environmental and social value and help us recover better from the pandemic and cushion us against current and future crises. UNCTAD is supporting developing countries to improve their trade policies to ensure the sustainable use of the ocean, seas and coasts, not only for economic growth, but also to improve livelihoods and jobs while preserving the health of the ocean ecosystem. The media contact in Lisbon will be Amalia Navarro. I will give you her contact details in my notes. 3 events there are organized by UNCTAD, one on fisheries, aquaculture and seafood. The second one will discuss the capacities to create a sustainable ocean economy. And the third one will discuss with the CITES, the Convention on International Trade and Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, towards sustainable and traceable ocean trade. The spotlight will be the connection with the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, while the common work together. 3 reports are in the pipeline. One will be published today, and it's called "The War in Ukraine and its Effect on Maritime Trade Logistics." It's a short assessment of the sector, it's around 6 pages, written by the team led by Jan Hoffman. The war in Ukraine is stifling trade and logistics of Ukraine and the Black Sea region. The search for alternate trade routes for Ukrainian goods has rapidly increased the demands on land and maritime transport infrastructures and services. For Ukraine's trading partner, many commodities must now be sourced from further away. This has increased global vessel demand and the cost of shipping around the world. Grains are a particular concern given the leading role of the Russian Federation and Ukraine in agri-food markets and its nexus to food security and poverty reduction. The report will be shared with you very soon. It's really in the last steps of the publication process. Midday, I will share with you a news presenting another report on lessons learned so far from the COVID-19 pandemic. It can help the world respond better to other crises. It details how the pandemic has exposed the weaknesses in the structure of the international social and economic order. It will be presented to member states this morning at the TDB Trade and Development Board meeting. And the Global Trade Update, the third report I wanted to mention again, its publication has been delayed, but we will be ready on Monday too, and we'll send it to you. It's also a short report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Yes, indeed, the Oceans Conference will start next week in earnest, but it already begins today, actually, with the UN Ocean Conference Youth and Innovation Forum. That's starting in Cascais. And it's going to go on until the 26th, and our Secretary General is expected to take part on Sunday. We will, of course, share any remarks that we get from his office with you. In terms of questions, I see Jan Heberman has his hand raised.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay, great. Yes, good morning. There are reports that an agreement on the export of grain from Ukraine might be imminent. You know, the negotiations between the Russians, the Ukrainians, the Turks. And since the UN is heavily involved in these talks, especially Secretary General Greenspan, could you please update us on the latest developments? And secondly, which of the UN agencies might be involved in a possible distribution of of grain from the Ukraine to the world? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jan. Very important questions, and we've been getting them often. At this point, we don't have anything to share concretely. I think the discussions are ongoing, and because they are extremely sensitive, we can't go into the details of this at the moment. But as soon as something could be announced, of course, you will be the first to know. So we're monitoring this extremely closely, and the UN officials involved in these negotiations are dealing with this on a daily basis. I see, Jan, you have your hand raised again. Maybe you have a follow-up?
Oh, yeah, follow-up. Could you tell us, or could you confirm that the SG will be traveling to Turkey next week in order to clinch the deal?
I'm afraid I can't. I don't have his latest travel schedule. All I know is that he will be in Lisbon. Well, as I mentioned, at least on Sunday, he's going to be speaking at the UN Ocean Conference. If we get an announcement from his office on his upcoming travels, we will share them with you. John Zaragoza?
Yes, good morning, Catherine. Firstly, on the conference on the oceans in Lisbon, has UNCTAD prepared any in-house study on the impact of subsidies by large fishing fleets on resources, given that you're the think tank for developing countries, and that's been a big issue in the WTO? And I've got a follow-up question, thanks.
Thank you, John. Good morning. I have to check with David Vivas where we stand on the analysis on the subsidies. Yes, we've been following this issue very closely. I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, and the second question is with reference to the study on lessons learned from COVID-19 pandemic. Does the UNCTAD analysis look into the impact in the manufacture and distribution of vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics, or just on the social impact?
I don't think we go into this detail, but it's a wrap-up of all the reports we've been publishing since March 2020 on the impact of the pandemic. But I can check if there's any assessment on what you just mentioned.
Good, thank you very much, Catherine. I don't see any more questions for you, so just Peter Kenny has raised his hand. Peter, quickly.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, my question is not for Catherine. It's for you, Réal. We were informed at the last press briefing that a speech that the DG was making yesterday would be sent to the media, and so far it's uncited. Can you follow that up? Thank you.
I sent it last night,
okay.
Around 5 p.m. It was as prepared for delivery, and to check against delivery, you can watch the speech that she gave on the webcast, on Web TV. It should be archived there.
Okay.
Maybe it got lost in your mail, but I did send it out.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much, Katrina. We're going to move along with our agenda. We're going to UNICEF. James Elder has a guest, Sheldon Yett. He is the UNICEF's representative in Bangladesh, and he's joining us from Dhaka, and he's going to brief on the situation of children and families affected by floods in Bangladesh. I don't know if, James, do you wish to say anything ahead of Mr. Yett, or should we go directly to him?
Morning. No, let's go direct. Thanks, Rael.
Very good. Mr. Yett, are you with us?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you perfectly. Go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you very much. The situation caused by flash floods in northeastern Bangladesh has deteriorated rapidly over the last week. At this very moment, 3.5 million children are in urgent need of safe drinking water. That's a staggering number of children, and an increase over the last couple of days. Huge areas are completely underwater and are disconnected from safe drinking water and food supplies. Children need help right now. Preventing waterborne diseases is a critical concern. Children are at high risk in this desperate situation. Cases of diarrhea and other deadly diseases are rising, with some 2,700 cases of diarrhea recorded as of the middle of this week. Over 40,000 water points and almost 50,000 toilets have been damaged. Waterborne disease can begin to spread very quickly when people are forced to drink contaminated water. 90% of health facilities in Sylhet Division have been inundated, and child immunization services have been interrupted. Over 5,000 schools and learning centers are submerged. Schools have been closed at a time when children are just beginning to recover from one of the world's longest pandemic school closures, some 18 months. The risk of drowning is very high. At least 15 children have tragically lost their lives. Nearly 500,000 people have been evacuated into crowded evacuation centers. And I'm particularly concerned for children who have been separated from their family. About 2,000 children were already suffering from severe acute malnutrition before the floods in these affected areas, and hundreds of them are in urgent need of treatment, which has been disrupted. Children and their families need help now. UNICEF and our partners in government are working against time to support these children. The airport in Sylhet was closed down until yesterday, and UNICEF has been moving supplies by truck through the flooded communities to the children in need. Some 1,750,000 water purification tablets have already been delivered. UNICEF is supporting the government to bring in millions of additional water purification tablets. We're bringing in water containers, known as jerry cans, as well to those who are affected. Thousands of hygiene kits for women and adolescent girls have also been delivered by UNICEF. UNICEF is helping children who were lost in the chaos to reunite with their families, and we're supporting children living with disabilities to access life-saving services. Let me finish by sharing a story about a little boy called Akil and the sisters Faria and Samia. Their home was washed away by the floods, completely gone. They took shelter in the only place their parents could find, which was under a tarpaulin at the back of a truck. And for 2 days, they had no water and no food. The family became more and more desperate as their thirst and hunger became harder to bear. When they managed to find a small shop that was open, a small bottle of water cost more than $1. And that was a very high price to pay to quench the thirst for a family of 5. After 3 days, they finally received relief supplies of food and water. They've now sheltered in the truck for over a week. The ordeal of Akil, Faria, and Samia is one that is being repeated in many ways by Bangladeshi children throughout the flood-affected area. UNICEF Bangladesh is urgently seeking some 2.5 million in funding right now for this emergency response. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yet. Let's see if there are any questions for you. Yes, Lisa Schlein from Voice of America.
Good morning, Rael. Yes, good morning, Mr. Yet. Just a quick question. You mentioned that 15 children have been drowned. Have there been any other deaths among children who are malnourished, or those who have contracted diarrhea or other waterborne diseases, or is this too soon? And how large is the malnutrition rate in Bangladesh? And are you concerned about deaths?
Yes, thank you. I mean, obviously, it's very hard to draw direct connections. Indeed, people are at risk for malnutrition. People are, and flooding makes it even worse. But it's often hard to tell if something is directly from the flooding or something is related to other things that are happening there. So we can't tell you, other than those children who have drowned, additional children who have been who have died from the flooding itself. In terms of malnutrition, well, this part of the country actually has one of the highest rates of malnutrition. So we are concerned that the interruption of health services will make the situation even worse. So these children who were at risk before the flooding are even at much greater risk for malnutrition now.
Very good. Are there any other questions for Mr. Yet? I don't see any. John Zaragoza has raised his hand. John?
No, my question is not for the rep from Bangladesh.
Okay, who is it for?
It's on another UNICEF topic. To James.
On which topic you said?
It's not on the one being briefed now on Bangladesh.
Okay, so we'll come back to you, John. Thanks.
Oh, thanks.
If there are no other questions on Bangladesh for Mr. Yet, then we thank you very much for being with us this morning, and we look forward to having you again for another briefing later. Thank you. We are going to continue with UNICEF. We have also UNICEF's representative in Afghanistan, Mr. Mohammed Ayoya, who is joining us from Kabul to tell us about, yes, the situation of children and families after this horrible earthquake that has just shaken Afghanistan. Mr. Ayoya, good morning, and over to you.
Good morning, bonjour à tous. Thank you very much for your time. Indeed, I would like to bring you this morning up to date with the latest from here, Afghanistan, following the earthquake that struck in the early hours of 22nd June in two provinces, Host and Paktika. The earthquake was another tragic reminder of the challenges facing the people of Afghanistan. Our heartfelt condolences go out to all those affected, and we wish those injured a speedy recovery. As of late last night, at least 1,036 people were reported killed and more than 1,643 reported injured. At least 121 of these deaths were children, and 67 of those injured were also children. The total number of people killed or injured is not yet confirmed. Verifications are ongoing, and we expect to see these numbers going up in the hours and days to come. Bermal district in Paktika province reportedly has the highest number of casualties. Several thousand homes are destroyed and or damaged. Children and adolescents are extremely vulnerable and at high risk of family separation, emotional and psychological distress, abuse and exploitation, and other forms of violence. UNICEF and our partners, alongside the de facto authorities, are working around the clock to gather information to better inform the response, even as we deliver life-saving supplies on the ground. A team of 14 UNICEF extenders has been on the ground in the worst affected district since the morning of 22nd of June. These extenders are assessing the extensive damage and urgent needs of the affected populations to prioritize our assistance. Already, we know that children and families affected by the earthquake are in urgent need of shelter, clean water, medical care, and protection. 9 UNICEF-supported mobile health and nutrition teams have been on the ground in earthquake-affected areas since 22nd of June, providing life-saving medical care to the injured. UNICEF has provided emergency medicine and medical supplies to the medical and health and nutrition teams to be able to provide the services to the people, but also to our partners in both provinces, Host and Paktika. These supplies are already being used to provide critical care. We have already provided 500 first aid kits, while 45 acute watery diarrhea kits were also dispatched to help prevent the spread of AWD and cholera, which is a high risk in the aftermath of earthquakes due to damaged water systems and limited hygiene. We have also distributed life-saving wash supplies and non-food items to partners, including 3,000 hygiene kits, 980 winter kits, 200 emergency family kits, soap and water purification tablets, tents, blankets, warm gloves, and tarpaulins. In coordination with other UN agencies and partners, UNICEF and the de facto authorities led by the Ministry of Defense is rapidly preparing a multi-sectoral response covering health, wash, child protection, nutrition, education, social mobilization, and component of cash transfers. We will be conducting a rapid market assessment in the affected areas in the coming days. The assessment will inform the feasibility and appropriateness of a cash response to support early recovery. UNICEF has already trained partners for beneficiary registration on the ground. In WASH, our response includes providing soap and water treatment products to mitigate the increased risk of AWD cholera outbreak. We will also respond with emergency latrines, repair the damaged water systems, and emergency water tracking. In child protection, UNICEF is activating community-based child protection networks in the affected areas, and we will increase the number of child protection services provided and social workers. Unfortunately, this morning at around 10 a.m., another tremor has hit again Guyana, one of the areas, and at this point, 5 deaths were reported, but also 10 more injuries. And this is just making the situation on the ground more and more difficult. And we are planning tomorrow with the SRSG acting to be on the ground with WHO, WFP, UNHCR, and OCHA. With that, thank you, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ayoya, for this briefing. It must be an extremely difficult situation on the ground, and UNICEF, of course, is playing an important role in providing assistance to victims. We have a number of other UN agencies there as well, playing their role. The World Food Programme, I understand, is delivering in-kind food stocks. The UN Population Fund is providing dignity kits and support to health facilities. The IOM is also on the ground doing some assessments, and the World Health Organization is providing medical supplies and medical treatments. But the UN Refugee Agency is also there, and we have Shabia Mantour to tell us a little bit more about their work on the ground. Shabia.
Thank you, Rael, and good morning, everyone. Indeed, UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, is rushing tons of relief items and deployed several expert staff to support relief efforts in the southeastern parts of Afghanistan that have been hit by Wednesday's earthquake. The items include shelter and household supplies consisting of tents, blankets, jerry cans, buckets, plastic sheets, kitchen sets and solar lamps. The relief items were delivered from UNHCR's stockpiles in Kabul and loaded onto 9 trucks on Thursday. They will support some 4,200 survivors in Gyan, Burmal, Zerak and Nika districts in Paktika province and Spera district in Khost province, which have seen hundreds of casualties and thousands of homes destroyed or damaged. In the worst earthquake to hit the country in the last 20 years, almost 800 people have been confirmed dead and many more injured. The devastation was compounded by the fact that people were sleeping, including in mud houses in one of Afghanistan's most remote regions. Paktika province was worst affected, with Afghanistan's interim authorities so far reporting 500 fatalities in Burmal and 238 in Gyan district. Some 29 fatalities were reported in Spera district of Khost province as of Thursday. In addition, at least 1,455 people have been reported injured across 3 of 6 of the most affected districts of Burmal, Gyan and Spera, and many of them have been seriously injured. Afghanistan's interim authorities report that most search and rescue operations had been completed already by Wednesday evening, but due to the remoteness of the affected areas and with additional assessments taking place on Thursday, the number of casualties and damage estimates could rise. Heavy rains have swept the region in recent days, also compounding the misery. UNHCR deployed staff who will help arrange shelters for people who have been left homeless by the devastation. UNHCR teams are establishing 3 supply hubs in Gyan, Burmal and Spera districts so that humanitarian support arriving from Kabul can be swiftly shifted to the communities affected by the earthquake. More support is urgently needed to avert a subsequent humanitarian disaster in the affected areas. There is also a serious risk of waterborne diseases. 4 decades of conflict and instability in Afghanistan have left millions of people on the brink of hunger and starvation. Already, some 24 million Afghans are in need of humanitarian assistance due to the hunger and economic crisis, the lack of development aid, and the impact of the changeover in government authorities 10 months ago. Afghanistan currently has some 3.5 million conflict-displaced people, plus some 1.57 million climate-displaced people. In recent months, there have been repeated bombings and violent attacks in various parts of the country. The UNHCR is supporting millions of Afghans inside the country and in neighboring Pakistan, Iran, and Central Asia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shabia. We'll take some questions. Are there? Yes, Robin from AFP.
Thank you. A question for both Shabia and for Mohammed as well. Have you faced any difficulties in coordinating with the Taliban authorities in responding to this earthquake so far? Thank you.
Thanks for your question. No, I mean, at UNHCR, we've been present as the UN Refugee Agency in Afghanistan over the past 4 decades, and so we've been staying and delivering for the people of Afghanistan and are working to deliver aid to those most affected. So we are, I mean, as soon as the earthquake hit on Wednesday, we had started deploying staff and supplies to reach those affected areas. But the real issue is ensuring that we have more support for the humanitarian response. Even before the earthquake, we had raised the alarm on the humanitarian issues affecting the country, and this is compounding that. So what's really important is that the international community supports the humanitarian response because we are on the ground working to deliver. Thanks.
Thank you. And I've just been informed Christian Lindmeier from the WHO is also on the line and could add a few bits of information on what they're doing in Afghanistan. So let's bring in Christian and then we'll continue with some questions. Christian?
Yeah, thank you very much, Real and colleagues. Just to add a few points here, because WHO, among other UN agencies and humanitarian partners, have been requested to support the de facto disaster management authority in assessing and responding to the immediate needs of the population. WHO has teams and supplies already on the ground supporting the response for all health emergencies. Surge staff have also been deployed to boost WHO support, including neurosurgeon, doctors, nurses, and trauma management officers that will support the hospital care for the injured and implementation of the mass casualty management plans in the hospitals. We also have deployed emergency officers and disease control officers to enhance surveillance for infectious diseases and health cluster coordinators to coordinate the response of the health partners. A shipment of about 10 tons and the volume of 95 cubic meters of medicine and medical supplies have reached the affected provinces of Paktika, Khost, and Paktia provinces. The shipment includes 30 emergency health kits and 50 surgical health kits, sufficient for about 5,400 surgeries and medical treatments covering 36,000 people roughly over the next 3 months. 8 ambulances and 2 mobile health teams sent to support transport of victims and bodies from the scene to the nearest hospitals have also been deployed. WGO teams also joined the interagency field mission that will conduct assessment in the affected areas for further health needs. We're also working on deploying mental health and psychosocial support experts to provide emergency counseling to the affected families. And of course, our teams are continuing to work on the disease outbreak preparedness and response, including for acute water diarrhea, cholera, and measles. WHO is setting up surveillance system in the affected areas to detect any possible outbreak. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christian. I see we have a question from Lisa Schlein, Voice of America.
Yeah, thank you. First, Mr. Ayoya and Christian, would you send us your notes? That would be very helpful. And Mr. Ayoya, are you in Kabul, I believe? Okay. I have a question for you regarding the protection problems that you're likely to encounter. Are you very concerned that I think in catastrophes, crises like this, children often are exploited and trafficked and so forth. So if you could describe the concerns that you have, and are there many children, as far as you know, that have been separated from their families as a consequence of this disaster? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for the question. Indeed, we are extremely concerned about any child protection issues that may result of this event. As a matter of fact, we currently have our teams on the ground doing assessments. We still do not have any yet report of child separated, but that's indeed one of our major concerns. We are sending tomorrow more teams, child protection on the ground to support the colleagues who are already there, to make sure that if there are any child protection issues, and in particular children who have been separated from their families, that those are identified and supported immediately. Let me come back to the first question around coordination. I would say that there are no issues at all on the ground in terms of coordination with the de facto authorities, which as a matter of fact have been very, very proactive in asking support from international community. As I said, there was a tremor this morning in Guyana at 10 a.m. and actually I was called by a very senior de facto authority to let me know that this has happened and has resulted in 5 deaths and 10 injuries, and again has called on us to support as much and as quickly as we can in that area. And there are no coordination issues as well among UN agencies and NGOs. We have all joint team on the ground for the assessments, but also for the response. And as I said, we are a high-level mission tomorrow of the head of agencies going to the ground together. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions on Afghanistan? I don't see any more hands. John Zaragoza, did you not have a question for James?
Yes, if he's still there, I don't know if he's taken off.
I believe he is. Go ahead. What is your question?
Yes, James. I was wondering if UNICEF is tracking the number of school children killed by gun violence in the United States, and if you've got a tally for 2022, there've been over 230 mass shootings, and if you got the if you're tracking the school children killed in these shootings at UNICEF. Thanks very much.
Hi, John. I'm not sure, but obviously we have UNICEF in the USA, as in the national committee that does advocacy there in country, and of course our headquarters in New York with our child protection team. So give me a few hours for New York to have their morning coffee, and I'll come back to you at the very least on a number. You said this year, yeah, 2022?
I think we've lost John.
Yes, for 2020. Yeah, for this year.
Okay.
January to June.
No problem.
Yes, thanks very much.
Back to you by close of business, our time. Thanks,
Sure,
John.
thanks.
Good, very good. Thank you, James, and thank you, Mr. Ayoya, the UNICEF's representative in Afghanistan, and Tushabi Amantu from the Refugee Agency. All the best with your efforts to relieve victims from this horrible catastrophe. Before we go to Ravina, we're going to, we have Christian on the line, and he has a short announcement, just a short update on the monkeypox. So we're going to allow him to do that briefing.
Yeah, thank you very much again, Real. It's more on popular demand that media here, journalist friends want to know what's going on with the monkeypox emergency committee. So the committee is still deliberating their statement, and we are all waiting for the outcome and for the statement. At this point, we are expecting it later today, in the late afternoon of today, Friday, and depending on the outcome, we will, I guess, see what we do, whether we call for a press conference or whether it will be a written statement only. That's all I have so far. So the only thing I can really share with you that I'm keeping my afternoon and evening free, and I'm also keeping my Saturday morning free, which is not very comforting in this situation, I know, but that's all the planning security I can give you so far. Unfortunately, and again, we would notify as soon as we have anything, but we're planning mainly on this afternoon. A quick second note for those of you who have time and don't have other engagements. At 1 o'clock today, there's a webinar on monkeypox outbreak and mass gatherings, and an advisory was sent. So if you want to know more about this is you can join, or you can watch it on YouTube. Thank you, Real.
Thanks, Christian. We have a few questions for you. Catherine Fiancon.
Yes, good morning, Christian. Thank you for your availability anyway. Could you please share with us the composition of the emergency committee and who is chairing it? Thank you.
It was shared yesterday. You see the link to the full list, and with the chairs and everything in one of the links yesterday is sent yesterday evening. If you don't have it, I'll send it to you individually.
Peter Kenny.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question. Morning, Christian. I was just wondering if you can give us the latest global figure for the number of reported cases of monkeypox. Thank you.
Thank you much, Peter. As yesterday mentioned by the DG in his opening remarks to the emergency committee, we now have over 3,200 confirmed cases in 48 countries and 5 WHO regions. That's the recent count.
Thank you. Jeremy Lange.
Thank you, Real. Just to make sure about, I get it right about the timing, Christian. We will get a statement before the potential press briefing, or will be at the same time? And will it be a press conference only if there's a FIC, or are you planning to have a press conference anyway, even if you don't declare a FIC?
I don't, so let me start this way. A, we don't have clarification yet whether there will or will not be a press conference. In relation to the statement, if we have a press conference, then the statement will go out together with the briefing. Typically, when we had it in one room, once upon a time, we would hand out the statement the moment the press briefing starts. So I guess this is how it will work. The moment that the chair, typically at a press briefing, opens and starts announcing the statement, we would then send/distribute it. No, I cannot confirm whether a press briefing will only be in case of public health emergency of international concern, because that would, I guess, also mean the moment we call for a press briefing, the wires would run hot. So no, I do not know.
John Zacosta.
Yes, good morning, Christian. Just to clarify, the Emergency Committee are still deliberating and they're in session on the various evidence and submissions by various experts around the world. If you could clarify that the meeting is still going on and that's not the Secretariat trying to evaluate what the committee has suggested to the Director General. Secondly, if there is a press conference, will the chair of the Emergency Committee, Dr. Congo Bele from the DRC, will he be participating with Dr. Tedros in the press conference? Thank you.
Right, let me start by something else. I think Carla just put the link into the chat where you can see the composition of the EC members. That's for those. The emergency committee meeting ended yesterday somewhere around somewhere past 5 o'clock, and I think that was mentioned. But now what happens, because they mainly meet online, they're deliberating their statement, they clarify their statement between each other online or by email and have to agree on the statement. That's what's happening currently to finalize and precise the statement. The exact composition of a possible press briefing, I don't know, but I would assume we would make the chair available, ideally with the Director General, but again, that's uncertainty still.
Very good. We will wait eagerly for more news from you, Christian, on this very important issue. There are no other questions for you, so thank you very much, Christian, and we look
thanks for letting me
you.
jump the line, but I think they were waiting.
Thank Ravina. She's been gracious. She graciously accepted. We have Ravina Shamdazani from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights on 2 issues, so take it away, Ravina.
Thanks, Riel. Good morning, everyone. This is on the killing of a journalist in the occupied Palestinian territory last month. More than 6 weeks after the killing of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh and the injury of her colleague Ali Samoudi in Jenin on the 11th of May 2022, it is deeply disturbing that Israeli authorities have not conducted a criminal investigation. We at the UN Human Rights Office have concluded our own independent monitoring into the incident. All the information we have gathered, including official documentation from the Israeli military and the Palestinian Attorney General, is consistent with the finding that the shots that killed Abu Akleh and injured her colleague came from Israeli security forces and not from indiscriminate firing by armed Palestinians, as was initially claimed by the Israeli authorities. We have found no information suggesting that there was activity by armed Palestinians in the immediate vicinity of the journalists. In accordance with our global human rights monitoring methodology, our office inspected photo, video, and audio materials, visited the scene, consulted experts, reviewed official communications, and interviewed witnesses. According to our findings, on the 11th of May, soon after 6 a.m., 7 journalists, including Shireen Abu Akleh, arrived at the western entrance of the Jenin refugee camp in the northern occupied West Bank to cover an ongoing arrest operation by Israeli security forces and the ensuing clashes. The journalists said they chose a side street for their approach to avoid the location of armed Palestinians inside the camp, and they proceeded slowly in order to make their presence visible to the Israeli forces that were deployed down the street. Our findings indicate that no warnings were issued and no shooting was taking place at that time and at that location. At around 6:30 in the morning, as 4 of the journalists turned into the street leading to the camp, wearing bulletproof helmets and flak jackets with press markings, several single, seemingly well-aimed bullets were fired towards them from the direction of the Israeli security forces. One single bullet injured Ali Samoudi in the shoulder, and another single bullet hit Abu Akleh in the head and killed her instantly. Several further single bullets were fired as an unarmed man attempted to approach Abu Akleh's body and another uninjured journalist sheltering behind a tree. Shots continued to be fired as this individual eventually managed to carry away Abu Akleh's body. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, continues to urge Israeli authorities to open a criminal investigation into Abu Akleh's killing and into all other killings and serious injuries by Israeli forces in the West Bank and in the context of law enforcement operations in Gaza. Since just the beginning of this year, our office has verified that Israeli security forces have killed 58 Palestinians in the West Bank, including 13 children. International human rights law requires prompt, thorough, transparent, independent, and impartial investigations into all use of force resulting in death or serious injury. The perpetrators must be held to account.
Thank you very much, Ravina. Are there any questions for Ravina on this issue? And yes, Lisa Schlein.
Morning, Ravina. I just want to get a confirmation from you as to whether there has been any response to your findings from the Israeli authorities.
Thank you, Lisa. The Israeli authorities have conducted an investigation, but unfortunately they have not yet conducted a criminal investigation. They issued a statement, sorry, I'm just looking it up now. They issued a statement continuing to cast doubt on where the bullet came from. And they say that it is still not, it has yet to be determined whether. Here it is. The IDF investigation clearly concludes that Ms. Abu Akleh was not intentionally shot by an IDF soldier and that it is not possible to determine whether she was killed by a Palestinian gunman shooting indiscriminately in her area or inadvertently by an IDF soldier. This is what they've said, but they've failed to launch a criminal investigation to determine exactly what happened. There have been several investigations conducted by media, by other outlets, by the Palestinian authorities, and there's this monitoring from our office. And this monitoring from our office is consistent with many findings out there that the shots that killed her came from Israeli security forces. So we are calling for a criminal investigation to determine clearly what happened.
Lisa, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I just want a clarification. So the information you have is not an investigation that your office itself has carried out, but I mean, there have been investigations and reports from a number of media outlets and so forth. So is it mainly a compilation of the information that you've gleaned from these sources, plus kind of eyewitness views from your own monitoring team?
Thanks, Lisa. We don't call it an investigation. We call this human rights monitoring because we don't have the capacity to conduct a criminal investigation to establish intent. What we have done, however, is we've done our own work. We've inspected photo, video, audio material. We visited the scene. We've consulted with experts, and we've looked at official communications. We've interviewed people who were also on the scene when Abu Akleh was killed. So this is independent monitoring from our side and consistent with our methodology that we use for human rights monitoring in many other country situations. And based on this very rigorous monitoring, we find that the shots that killed Abu Akleh came from Israeli security forces and not from indiscriminate firing by armed Palestinians.
Thank you, Ravina. I don't see any more questions on this issue, so you can move to Kyrgyzstan.
Very briefly, you should have already received a press briefing note on Kyrgyzstan. We are alarmed by measures underway in Kyrgyzstan to dissolve the National Center for the Prevention of Torture and to transfer its functions to the Kyrgyz Institute of the Ombudsman. And we urge the government to halt this plan, which risks weakening Kyrgyzstan's efforts to prevent torture. There's much more detail in the note that you've received.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Ravina on this? John Zaragoza.
I'm sorry, it's not on Kyrgyzstan, it's on another item, sorry.
Is it for Ravina? You can go ahead.
Oh, yes. Can you hear me there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, fine. Yes, fine. Good morning. Yes, Ravina, I asked this question earlier. Has there been any statement from the Office of the High Commissioner on the decision by the UK government to extradite Julian Assange to the United States? Thank you.
Thanks, John. No, there's been no statement. We have been, of course, following Mr. Assange's case. We're aware that the UK Home Secretary decided to approve on Friday the request to extradite him to the US. And we note that the decision is subject to appeal proceedings before it can be implemented. As we've said previously on Assange's case, we recall the importance of ensuring the respect for due process guarantees and the right to effective remedies, including the right to appeal for all people without distinction of any kind, including political or other opinions. We also underscore that all extradition decisions must respect the principle of non-refoulement, and we'll continue to monitor the situation.
Very good. Thank you so much, Ravina. I don't see any more hands raised for you, so thanks for being with us this morning. That concludes the formal agenda that we had. I just have a few announcements for you in terms of press conferences. Lots happening, starting today at 12 noon after this briefing. There is an UNMAS press conference on responding to emergency, the impact of humanitarian mine action, with several representatives from Afghanistan, Ukraine, and also the ICRC. Then on Tuesday, 28th of June at 3 p.m., there will be an OCHA update on the humanitarian situation in Syria with Imran Riza, the United Nations Resident Coordinator and Humanitarian Coordinator in Syria. Then on Wednesday, 29th of June at 10 a.m., UN Women will be here to speak about the government's responses to COVID-19, lessons on gender equality for a world in turmoil. That will be with Adriana Quinones, the Director of the Geneva Liaison Office for UN Women, and Laura Turquet, also Policy Advisor and Deputy Chief of Research and Data at UN Women. Then Friday, 1st of July at 12 noon, another OCHA update, this time on the humanitarian situation in Lebanon with Najat Roshdi, the Deputy Special Coordinator for Lebanon and United Nations Resident Coordinator and Humanitarian Coordinator in that country. And also at 1:30 p.m. on the 1st of July, the Human Rights Council, there will be a press conference on the presentation of the report of the independent fact-finding mission on Libya. And that's with the chair of the mission, Mohamed Aujar, and two members of the mission, Tracy Robinson and Chaloka Beyani. In terms of meetings, other meetings on the Human Rights Council happening, the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women is concluding this morning its review of the report of Mongolia, and this afternoon will conclude its review of the report of Bolivia. The Human Rights Committee is going to be opening next Monday, the 27th of June at 10 a.m. its 135th session. That's going to be at the Palais Wilson. until the 27th of July, during which it's going to review the reports of the Russian Federation, Luxembourg, Uruguay, Ireland, Georgia, Hong Kong, and Macau. And you can find the full schedule on their website. Just alerting you to the fact that on Monday, the 18th of July, in the afternoon, the committee will have a public informal meeting with state parties. The Conference on Disarmament will hold next Tuesday. It's at 10 a.m. Its next public plenary meeting, the first one under the presidency of Ambassador Paul Mpole Mfambe of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And there was something else I wanted to mention to you. Yes, you know that today the Secretary General will be launching the action agenda on internal displacement. That's going to be live streamed on UN Web TV, and we shared with you this morning his video message and also the link where you can follow this event. Be aware that today at the noon briefing in New York, Robert Piper, the Secretary General's Special Advisor on Solutions to Internal Displacement, will be briefing on the launch of this action agenda on internal displacement for those who would like to follow that. And then at 1:30 p.m. there will be, also in New York, but you can watch it, I believe, live on Web TV, this hybrid press briefing by the Commissioner General of UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini. And that's all that I have for you today. If there are no last questions, then I will close this briefing. Thank you very much for participating. Have a good afternoon and a good weekend. Thank you.
Recording stopped.